Okay, so can we just be honest for a second? Have you ever looked at your to-do list and thought, how in the world am I supposed to be strategic right now? Like my emails are overflowing. People keep stopping me for a quick chat that turned into an hour conversation. I haven't even touched my to-do list that I made for today, and suddenly my leadership is asking me, what's the strategic HR plan? It's giving real chaos, okay? But listen, I get it. I know I have been there. I have lived it. You are juggling everything, right? You're doing onboarding. Maybe you managing those performance conversations. You coaching leaders. You managing compliance. You answering random Slack or Teams questions. And somehow you are expected to have the time, brain space, and the energy to think about the big picture. But you know what? I know you have the ideas. I know you have the insight. And honestly, here's the thing, you know that I know you can't afford not to be strategic. But how in the heck do you get out of this cycle of reacting to everything to start showing the leaders in your organization the real value that you bring? This is why I wanted to have this conversation because I've talked to so many colleagues who are struggling with this. They want to be strategic. They know that they need to be strategic, but they are really struggling with how to get out of the day to day tactics and how to get out of the weeds when their plates are overflowing and they're running on coffee and a prayer. Okay, so we're going to talk about this today because here's the thing, strategic HR is important, it is essential, right? And we need to be showing our strategic value in the organization. So when we think about strategic HR, to me, strategic HR is really about saying, hold on, why are we doing this again? Is this the best way that we should be doing it this? Really stopping to look at a process and asking yourself, is this helping us? Or is it just making us more busy? Is it just easier for somebody else, right? But really digging into connecting the dots of your HR work to the bigger plans of the organization. Maybe that's looking at how your HR work impacts retention. How is it impacting company performance? How is it impacting team performance? Or even better, how is it tied into your company goals and helping your department heads reach their goals? What strategic HR is not, it is not being the human search engine for policies and procedures. It's not living in a constant state of reaction mode. It is not carrying the weight of everything and then being expected to pull off some long term planning like a magician, right? It's not doing that. It is really about being intentional. And the reason that I'm talking about this is because hopefully you know, like I know, that being strategic, especially in HR, is critical. But the thing is, how do we push for strategy when we're already drowning? Right? Because when you're stuck in the day to day stuff, it keeps you hidden. And guess what? I know, like you know, you were not built to stay hidden, right? When you start thinking strategically, people see you different. You're not just the person who handles the paperwork. You're not just the person who does that little HR stuff over there. They start to see that you know and understand the big picture. When you start thinking about what's next, when you start connecting the dots, when you start noticing the patterns and looking at ways to help your company stay ahead of the problem and not just fixing them after they explode, you have now elevated your role. And the best part about all of this is when you become more strategic and you make those strategic moves, you start to reduce the chaos. Because guess what? The systems work better. The communication flows better. And people stop pinging you for those same old questions. It's a win win. It's a win for them and it is a win for you. So, the first step to all this is really taking a second to just zoom out a bit, right? Take some time to ask yourself, what's taking up my time each week? Is there something that I'm doing over and over again that we could really automate or simplify? Where can I connect the work that we're already doing to the bigger people or business outcome? So, for example, I was thinking about this, right? Like, if you are somebody who maybe part of your role is to manage performance reviews, right? Or even better, manage training that has been assigned out to your employees. Instead of just trying to keep up with, oh, how am I going to keep track of all these trainings? If you're using a spreadsheet, hopefully you have an HRIS system that can help you with that. But if you don't, how are you navigating that? Taking a second to think about, okay, what's really going on here? Is this a process problem? Is this a leadership gap? Is there some culture issue? Right? These are the types of questions that really help you show your strategic lens. It's where your voice starts to stand out. Because now you're not just tackling the issues after the fact, you're really being proactive in how you navigate systems and processes to make them more efficient, not just within your department, but ultimately something that's going to help the whole organization. Because here's the thing that we know that HR is a call center. Right. And 9 times out of 10, when your organization is looking at costs and expenses, HR is definitely considered a cost center, not just for the expenses of the HR staff, but a lot of times the expenses of the whole staff could live in the HR department. So now that's a big number, right? And so your organization is looking at, oh, we have all this expense over here. Where's the value? Right? And some of that is going to come from the employees and the staff that are in your organization. But when you look at your HR team, your HR size, you have to really think about what is the value that HR can bring and how do we connect the dots for the leaders in the room? And how do we begin to start to ask better questions so that they can see HR is not just a task manager, that we are really here to help the organization be better. We're really here to shift the culture that our employees are in. We're really here to help those leaders create spaces and create value so that their employees will come back. That helps you as HR because you're not constantly recruiting, and that helps the organization on the expense side because they're not constantly paying for you to recruit, right? So being strategic is really about taking a second to kind of step back and think about what's working, what's not, and where can I begin to make an impact within my HR function. And so, one tip that I want to give you is if you are not currently blocking off time in your calendar, I would say daily, but at least a few times a week for strategic, deep thinking work, start doing that. Block off your time, block off an hour to 2 hours. Try to block off about 3 hours a week if you can, because you're really going to need some time to sit down and really focus and to not be struggling through just putting out all of the fires. You need to have some time on your calendar where you can really sit down and start to think about what's working in your organization, what's not working in your organization. And even if you just look at it from an HR perspective, what's working within the HR department, what's working within your scope of influence, right? The things that you can shift and change, what's not working. How can I begin to make those things better? How can I start to have, if you are not the HR leader in your organization, how can you start to have conversations with your HR leader about some of these things that need to shift and change? Okay, so here's the thing. I know that you want to be strategic. I know that you do not want to be running around constantly putting out fires. But there are far too many HR professionals where that is their day in and day out. So I wanted to put together this series. This is the first video in this series, and we're going to be talking about how can we continue to elevate the role of HR and show our strategic value. So if you've made it this far in this video, drop me a little comment. Let me know what part of your job is already strategic, even if nobody sees it, right? Or what other tips do you have that are working for you that you've been using to elevate some of the work that you're doing in HR so that you can have more visibility and that it can be more strategic. So we're going to continue to talk about this. I'm not letting this topic go because I believe that it needs much more visibility and that we need to continue having this conversation. So, as always, remember you've got this and I've got your back. And until next time, I will see you in the next one.